computer. Okay, everyone. This is class, I'm now recording. This is our second class for 303, British literature. We're following our amended curriculum, our coronavirus curriculum, and studying texts both about plague, some of which are contemporary to this period of early modern and then Enlightenment followed, and we'll eventually get to Romantic and Victorian England. It's the society that laid down the tracks, that set the example for modern society, the world that we still live in. It might be changing in the 21st century. This has been a very confusing period, your young adulthood, but it still is the world that we recognize of states and markets, commerce, privacy, culture, and that is what our course usually takes in. We'll be continuing about that, and we're also studying a second unit that is only relevant in the last few weeks, that became obvious to me as something that deserves our attention now. Text about epidemic, plague, pandemic. Voices from the past that can clarify or help us understand at least a bit about this confusing, terrifying period that we're in. That's a bit of a repetition for those who are already here, but now it's been recorded for those who will refer to this later, whether it's you or others. Today, our course I strive to keep it brief. We'll begin with a plague unit. I'll look briefly at Isaac Newton's 1665-1666 experience during the London plague, the outbreak of plague in England. And then we'll turn back to Thomas Hobbes and the Leviathan in an effort, we're going to complete the excerpts that we've been reading of the Leviathan about the foundations of the modern state. Okay, questions, or is everyone okay? All right, let's get to it. I'm going to share screen, and I'm going to go to the Isaac Newton. Close this a little bit. Good. And I have the chat open. Once again, I can't see people who are raising hands, so for right now, I can't actually see who's raising hands for the next few minutes. But you're welcome to either unmute yourselves. You have that ability. I'm keeping that function in place. So if you have something to say, I will be able to hear it. So will everyone else. And in addition, I think the chat is a fabulous function. You guys can share messages with each other. If you want to pass notes, this is a very cool way to do it. You can write to anyone in the class. You could also, of course, write privately to me, and you can write to everyone. And I encourage you to take up the last one. If you have a question, comments, ideas, links, anything that's useful, put it in the chat. I can also share it and send it to everyone. So,
is there any possible way for you to make this a little bit, to put it on full screen?
Yeah. I have to remember how to do it, but yes, it's possible. Guys, tell me how to do it. Now, remember, I know how to do it from the regular screen. You see how to do it? Show grid video. Nope. Sorry. I know how to do it if I stop the share. I know how to do it like this. I could have done it there. I could have done it this way. Ha ha ha. Okay, better? Give a thumbs up if it's better. Okay, and now I'm going back to the sharing. And continue with the Safari. I also can do this with on a separate screen. I might actually try that also. That might be better, but we'll see. Okay, it's just, none of this is stuff I've been doing long. It's not impossible. This isn't difficult stuff. Okay. We talked on Monday about Samuel Pepys. He's got a funny spelling for his name. It's originally, I believe, from France. He is this diarist whose graphomania, his obsession with writing, left behind an incredible resource of his diary from the 1660s, telling us intimately about all kinds of things. 2 weeks ago, before the crisis got as bad as it is now, we spoke about this desire to write, to commit to writing, and all the conditions behind that. On Monday of this week, we looked at his writings about the plague, which was a major event, a disaster in 1665, 1666 London. We looked at his 1665 plague diaries, how this slowly and then rapidly grows in a way that is eerie for us. I thought about even issuing to you guys a kind of trigger warning, something I'm not fond of, but I know it's popular in the United States the last couple of years, or at least in the last decade, 2010s. But I realized, there's something actually consoling in what we did on Monday, to know that people have lived through plague, and with all the suffering, the death, the loss that Pepys talks about, and he does not hide it, his friends, the parents of his servants, people around him, and the disruption to his own life. He moves his entire family out of the city. There's nonetheless a kind of wisdom. It's very small, modest solace, but there is a kind of comfort, at least knowing that people have lived through this before. We are not the first ones. And nor was Pepys the first. There are earlier incidents that are left to us in literature, both European and elsewhere. And we looked at some of the phrases. I remember Tikva helped us try to parse the phrase apprehensions of melancholy. And while we're writing, I was reading through your forum entries, trying to put words, trying to figure out exactly how we feel about it in language is a difficult task. Let's now talk about Thomas, let me see if I can do this with using the iPad, excuse me. And let's see if it's actually have my phone open. Boom, and because that might be a little easier to use. Cool. Okay. So there we go. Awesome. All right. So now I can see a few different things, and I hope you can as well. Where to go? Oof. Where'd I put it? What do you guys see my Safari, or do you guys see my phone? I just want to know where I need to put it. Someone answer in the chat. What's moving? Is it moving up and down right now for you?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So good. That's a lot easier for me to use than using the screen. Let's talk about what was happening. Is everything okay? Great. Liav is going to join us. Here comes Liav. Everyone, say hello to Liav.
She's going to do her work.
She's going to do her work as we do our work. Alana, everyone can see you. Say hello to the entire class.
Hello, the entire class.
Liav is doing Kesem. This is her plague homework. Liav, we're going to talk now about what a famous scientist did during the plague, during the corona of his time. During the corona of his time, Isaac Newton discovered important things. Actually, you don't care. I see you're interested in Seder. Okay. This is Liav's own. We haven't been outside the house, but this is Liav's own personal mask. You want to wave to everyone? Good. Okay. So Liav's made her own corona mask. What do you do when you want to show how safe you're going to be? That's what she does. Okay. We haven't been outside. I know that. Show us again. There you go. She's got her own mask. All right. They applauding here. I put them on silent so you can't hear them. All right. Is her name Liav with a V at the end? Let's now look at this. So you guys can see me moving this up and down. Is it going up and down? Let's get back to where we were. Is it scrolling? Excellent. Thank you. So Pepys was documenting what was happening in the city of London, and this sort of exclusive suburb that he traveled to of Greenwich. There was a young university student, your age, 22, 23 years old, about your age, a little older than some of you, a little younger than some of you, who was in university at the time, Cambridge, and the university closed for the plague, for an epidemic. Again, with the bubonic plague, it was not a coronavirus. It was not a virus at all. It's bacterial infection. And this is familiar to you. They sent everyone home. He had been living there in the dorms, and he went back to his home in Lincolnshire. You can look up where it is. I'm not exactly sure. And he was home for actually an entire year, for I think it was 3 semesters, which is an entire academic year in the British system. During that time, as some thought life was coming to an end, society was ending, thoughts that have surely crossed the minds of some of you, but there was still untold suffering, and he could not be at university. He had what is called the annus mirabilis, not anus, but annus, the year of wonders. Now, I know that some of you read a poem by this title, or sampled a poem by this title by John Dryden, with Dr. Shapira. That was about Europe and England in general. The annus mirabilis that Newton had was because in that year, he did several things. One, he invented calculus. I'm sure some of you are probably not thanking him for it, but depending on your experience from high school. But he invented calculus. He came up with major inventions in optics. He also came up with important discoveries about gravity. And the famous incident that we're going to talk about now for the next 3 or 4 minutes is the apple tree. Sitting at home in his home courtyard, it is said that he observed an apple fall in late summer of 1666. Mind you, that's a whole year after the Samuel Pepys diary entries that we were reading. So the plague was still going on, and he was still home. At least he had a garden to go to, is what I was thinking. Like, I'd love to have a nice garden also. But he wasn't stuck only in his house. He was sitting in his garden, his country garden. And the story goes that he saw an apple fall in late summer when apples become ripened in England. And this led to a chain of ideas that gave birth to modern gravity. This tree is still alive. I'll go to the bottom here. Here's the tree. It's on its, there's the Newton. There is, you can see the Newton estate and this is a picture of it in 1998. It still, as it says, you can see, still grows apples each summer. It's on its 3rd set of roots. It's had to be replaced several times. And offshoots or cuttings or progeny, baby, trees grown from this tree have been planted in physics departments all over England and in other important, stay here. No, stay here. Okay. In Belton Park, in Lincolnshire, as well as in the physics department of the University of York, which is actually pretty close. Here's their beautiful apple tree. They call it Newton's apple tree. Let's see what happened. In the summer, while on leave from university that was closed by plague, you can read here, he observed the fall of an apple. It's very well known. A lot of people say it's just a legend, but at least these physicists at the University of York, that's why I chose them, they claim that they opine that it's actually true. Although it seems that all the circumstances seem so far-fetched, who could have come up with so many important world-changing discoveries while home, separated from other scientists, completely isolated? And the whole apple tree, it seems so quaint. And obviously the apple tree is important in Christian iconology. It's associated with the original tree. We don't, in Judaism at least, we don't think of it as an apple tree, but the original tree of the desire in the Garden of Eden. Look at this. This is a 1726, so I think that's pretty early, only 60 years later, an account of someone called John Conduit, who was a contemporary. He lived at the end of Newton's life. Newton lived many more years. He made these discoveries when, again, he was a university student. And let's see what he has to say. I'm going to turn this over so we can read this letter by Thomas Conduit. All right. It's a little hard to read. I know the lighting's not great. But it's also a useful skill. It's really hard to read. It's really hard to read old people's writing, but they write beautifully. They probably would think that our writing is terrible. It says here in the top line, the method of fluxions in the year 1665. That's the first line on that. That's the first word on that line. 1665. That was when he first started having these ideas. When he retired, went back to his own estate on account of the last word on this next line is the plague. On account of the plague. Again, a word that we would use for epidemic, for the pandemic, for our plague is the corona. On account of the plague, he went back to his house, back to his family estate. He first thought of his system of, next word is gravity. And there's a lot of crossing out here. So there was a lot of revision, but this is what the person says. He's not making this up as a story for popular times in the 19th or 20th century. This is what he's saying in 1726, in which he hit upon, gravity, something he hit upon by observing an apple fall from a tree laid by his, and then he goes on and on and on. But there it is. That is a very early source for this case. He first thought of system of gravitation, which he hit upon by observing an apple fall from a tree in 1616. There are the details are various. Here's a drawing from 1820 that seems very reminiscent of that picture from 20-something years ago, from 1998. So there seems to be a kernel of truth here. What I want to focus on, I want to just mention it by way of closing on this, is that although this period is unwanted, although this period is one of suffering, and I don't mean to put any kind of silver lining in this, but strange things happen during history. Who would have thought that this young 20-something, maybe he would have gone on to an illustrious career and made these discoveries anyway had he stayed at university. But the tree, this kind of children's story, this simplicity of the fable, or the simplicity of that event of apples, the plague, being secluded, I think that there is some meaning behind all of that we can derive. Do people have any ideas about this? That's all I have to say about the plague for today. We'll go on to more plague readings next time. You could also read Isaac Newton's own writings. I was sampling them. They're pretty boring, but regarding this, he doesn't make much of the fact that he was a plague. Do people have ideas? Let me close this for a second. I'm going to stop the share. Look at all of you. Ideas? Full screen, gallery view. Good. It was definitely it's interesting that it's an apple tree. Other thoughts? Where are the participants? You guys can raise hands if you want to speak. You can unmute yourselves, or we can just move on. Okay, Sarah, thank you. Thank you guys for turning on your screens. If I asked you to, if you didn't have them on before, we're now going to continue with our second part of today's class, and my goal is to be done relatively soon. Here we are back in. Let me make it a little larger. Do you think that I find using the device, the second screen, I'm going to go back to sharing it. I find it to be a more convenient, just using my hands rather than, I find it a more convenient way of sharing, but you guys can give me your feedback as well. Here it is again. There's Leviathan. Fun fact about Newton, he's also an alchemist. He thought he was into also some crazy stuff as well. That was his real mission in life. And in fact, all of the people say, why, he lived so long, why were all his discoveries in his 20s? Same thing happened, by the way, to Einstein. In physics and advanced math, often the case is that breakthrough discoveries happen to that people when they're very young. There's a lot of speculation why this is true. It happened also to Newton, Einstein, others. Marie Curie she wasn't a physicist, but she continued to have major discoveries until her death. But Newton spent almost all his life, Tikva is correct, trying to discover alchemy, how to create wealth, new properties out of existing things, basically quack science. So this major scientist who changed the face of humanity believed he could figure out all kinds of crazy things, and that's how he spent most of his life. Einstein at least dedicated himself to all kinds of things. You might think it's also illusory, but he dedicated himself in his later years to peace and world peace. He was a pacifist. That's basically what he did. Different kind of alchemy. Also doesn't exist, world peace, but at least it seems like a more worthwhile one. The Leviathan. Let's conclude this. Here is, again, the famous cover we spoke about in 2 weeks. We're getting to the end here. Here is the picture of the sovereign, the Leviathan, the king, monarch, of course it's a man, with power on one side, the authority of the church on the other side, and it's made up of, what's it made up of? Can you see me, Abby? What's it made up of? A lot, can you see? Maybe you can see here.
A lot of people.
A lot of people, thank you. Yes, it's made up of a lot of little people. The Leviathan is made up of a lot of little people. We did the hard work on Monday, a little more tedious. I'm going to review and then conclude it now of what the Leviathan, this is not good. Yeah, this is the right one. What Hobbes thinks about people. And we spoke on Monday about the notion that people are really just horrible to each other. And this is what I want to focus on today. There actually, I would say there were 3 things I'm going to talk about at Leviathan. I'm going to do it by ABC, just not to confuse it with what I did before. One is the nature of people, nature of man, nature of humans. Every time I press, no, I want to do this. Sorry, I was almost going to do this just to one person privately. B is how people behave, or the nature of society. Actually, not the nature of humans, but the nature of let's talk about social contract. The nature of humans and the nature of how they behave to each other is the same thing. The social contract, creation of the Commonwealth, and C is the powers of the Leviathan. Okay, those are the 3 things I'm going to talk about now. 1, the nature of humans. We spoke about that a lot on Monday, and let's conclude it now. People are pretty horrible to each other, but because they are good to themselves. In their love for themselves and their families, people act horrifically to one another. Kind of a paradox. Let me explain as best I can. I'll elucidate as best I can. It's really helpful to see, like, Rosan taking notes. It's helpful to see some reaction because these are hard ideas. But we talked about the manners. We talked about how Hobbes understands human nature. And today, in the next 10 minutes, I want to make the bridge to how then does he think about the way people can relate to each other. He said that people are in a constant, restless state, not of peace, but of war to one another, because they're simply trying to care for themselves. Look here. People are in a natural state of war, a desire for power. And here's what this is. It's in chapters 13 and 14, of which we only read a tiny little excerpt, small piece. That because people are pretty much the same, said some people are a little bit smarter, a little prettier, a little kinder, a little stronger, that everyone's mostly the same. Everyone is after the same thing, which is to provide for their own needs and those of their immediate family. I need the same things you do. I need a roof over my head, food for my family, as much wealth as I can gather, and security for myself and my own loved ones. And because everyone needs the same thing, we're all going to be in competition with one another. This idea of competition is one we're going to come back to a lot. We all need the same toilet paper right now. We all need the same, I don't know, the same gargare hummus. We need the same rice. We all need the same cleaning products, and all around the world, everyone needs those same, what do they call them, the N95? Everyone needs those same masks. Everyone needs them. And so if I can get whether a box of 10, if I can get a case of 100, or if I can get a truckload of 1,000, I'll take as much as I can get. Now, it might endanger you, but as much as I like you or I care about you, I think it's nice that, I don't know, I can only see a few people of you. Let me see. I think it's nice that Yulia has hers. I'm just choosing random names here. Larice has hers. I'd rather care for my own kids. And so, screw you. And I will take them from you. I will rob you of them. If I can get, if they're in your backyard and I can get into them, if they're in your front salon and your door's open, I will go get it. We are in a constant state of war with one another. And so, as he says here, chapter 13, part 6, from this difference of one another, there is no way, right here, there is no way for any man to secure for himself so reasonable a temptation that it is by force of us to master the person. There is no real way to protect yourself from everyone else. Because although you want to protect yourself, there are a lot more other people than there is you. And everyone will try to take advantage. Let's finish this situation, then I'll ask you guys to evaluate it. Everyone lives in competition. Here it is right here. Let me see. This is actually worthwhile putting into the chat. In the nature of man, we find 3 principles of quarrel: competition, difference, glory. Also, he said all that before. People are into, some people, that was when he went into why people compete with one another. Some people want it for the glory. Some people want it for the power. Some people want it just because they need it, because of the need. Competition. But this is the state of affairs. This natural state of affairs between one another, between people, is one of quarrel, one of rivalry, and in the words that he uses, war. Now, we'll talk a little bit about this, well, as best we can. I'm not sure how to really have a conversation, but I want you to just to think about it. I guess you guys are all sitting in your own houses. That's how he sees things. It's a very dark idea about the nature of how people react, how people interact, excuse me. This is also a crucial part. I don't intend to put the entire Leviathan in our chat. I'm just highlighting these sections that we have them. You guys know which ones are important. We're only reading excerpts, but within the excerpts, these are the parts that are probably the crucial ones. People exist in a state of war against one another, not because they are bad to themselves. In fact, I'm just trying to take care of Liav here. It's not because they're evil. It's because of anarchy. Because if everyone is out for themselves, there can't be any sense of what's right and wrong. This is what I ended with on Monday. What's right for me is wrong for you. I'm doing the right thing. I'm trying to get myself those face masks. Of course, it will deprive you of all of your stock. And so, in a situation of solitude, there can be no society. It is definitely a primal instinct, yes. There can also be no right and wrong. Now, I find this to be, obviously it's scary. It's a very dark idea. It's a very dark idea of how we relate to one another. That we are, and this is where I can relate, I'm going to compare it. I'm going to try to make it relevant for us now. Let's go back. Let me go back to the picture. I'm going to stop the share for a minute, and I'll just focus on myself. The idea is that we are a danger to one another. And I think that is something that is very relevant to us right now. The notion that I am a threat to you. I'm inherently a threat to you. This is 100 years after Machiavelli, more than 150 years. I am inherently a threat to you, and everyone else is inherently a threat to me. It's not because people are evil. This is not a Christian idea of some or a reformist idea of the Reformation. It's not a Protestant idea that people have an evil soul. It's just that when we get together, in the absence of any organizing structure, we're going to call that government, commonwealth. In this book, it's called the Leviathan. We can't help, but it's not Yetzer Adam Ramanab. It's not saying that at all. It's because I'm actually good to myself. My goodness to myself is bad for you, is a threat to you. But when we get together, it is this state of war, because I am trying to care for myself. I'm trying to do what's right for some people have other motivations. He said there are various motivations. Some people do it for bad motivations. They just want the glory. But whatever your motivation is, whether it's altruistic, trying to just care for yourself, altruistic meaning in the context of your family, your servants, your household, your children, right? Or whether just for yourself, or whether it's a bad motivation. Like, I just want everyone to think I'm great. But nonetheless, we are going to be a threat to each other. I hope that the metaphor, or the relevance, not really a metaphor, but the relevance for us at this moment is clear. No matter how you feel, I want to help my entire society. I'd love to help those old people down the block. I'd love to deliver food to the Beit Horim, to the old age home. A lot of us have older folks either in our own immediate families or in our immediate vicinity who are at risk. But I am necessarily a risk to everyone around me. And everyone else, we're keeping our doors shut, because everyone else is a risk to us. We have to stay away. We put up walls. And the next part of this question, the next part of this relevance, or the contemporary applicability, the current, this emergency applicability of all this is going to come up with, then what is the role of the Commonwealth? What is the role of the state? Let's go back into the text. Okay, is this okay the way I'm doing this? Is it okay? I intend to be done in 15 minutes. I hope I am. I don't know. That's my goal. All right. And look what he says here, by the way. I just want to show you. Well, no, I have to do that. I have to click here. I have to click two separate things to make it happen every time. Zoom, done. Look at what it says. Just read what it says right here. He's writing this about just the everyday state of affairs between people. I don't know where I am. This is part 12. Was this just before the end of? This was back in chapter 2. I'm just jumping around. This was in chapter 13. It may seem strange, but this just jumped out to me. I was reading all this before. I was like, yep, that's what's going on now. That's what's going on now. It may seem strange to some man that has not well weighed these things, that nature should thus dissociate and render man act, invade and destroy one another, right? We are all a contagion, or we all risk to one another. And therefore, not trusting anyone else. Skim a few lines. This is what people should do for themselves. When taking a journey, he arms himself and seeks to go well in company. We don't want to go out. If you go out, you go with masks, you arm yourself. When going to sleep, lock your doors. Even your house, you lock your chest, you lock your safe, you lock your drawers. And he knows there will be laws. He knows, and this when he knows there will be laws. Okay, let's go. That we don't need. Okay, let's get to the end of this. The state of war against one another. Everything is fine when we're in a state of war. The right of nature is the liberty each man had to use his own power as he will for himself. So what do we have? What is allowed to us by the law of nature? That everyone should do what he needs to for himself, in his own judgment and reason. He shall conceive to be apt. Liberty. What is liberty? Liberty, in this idea, I'm just mentioning this now because although this is not relevant to us right now, I hope not. But this is an idea of libertarianism. What is liberty? That I can do whatever I want. Liberty is the absence of external impediments. In this state of anarchy, of war, of constant competition, liberty means I need to do whatever I need to do in order to whatever seems right to me, because I'm doing what I think I need to do to protect myself against all these horrible people, which is everyone else. This is the important part. I've put this on the chat. Because the condition of man is a condition of war against everyone else, in which case everyone is governed by his own reason, right? There is nothing you can make of that would not be helpful. There is nothing that you can do by naturally. The law of nature is that you should do whatever you need to do to preserve your life against his enemies. And who are my enemies? All of you guys, everyone. And that is the case right now, in the sense that everyone else is a danger to you. Everyone. And therefore, as long as this natural right of every man to everything endures, there can be no security. As long as this is the case, where everyone is a risk, and everyone will do whatever they need to do in their own eyes, everyone makes their own decisions. As long as this situation endures, there can be no security to any man, how strong, however wise you are, wherever you are in that very narrow band of that continuum of variability. Doesn't matter how strong, how smart you are, how rich you are right now, how big your family is, how big your house is. Doesn't matter. It's going to be horrible. Consequently, it is a precept or general rule that every man ought to endeavor peace. As much as you guys might want to, everyone wants to get better, because not everyone is trying to do this, right? You guys might be abiding. I'm sure this is the case for you. You guys are university students, and your families are. You guys are in the sense elite in this country. Despite, even if you are trying to do everything right, this quarantine, this has partial escape. It doesn't work unless everybody does it. Right? Consequently, the priest of a general reason that every man ought to endeavor peace. You might be wanting this to pass, but unless everyone wants this to get passed and follows the rules, it doesn't work. The second is some of the right of nature, which is by all means. So you might want to do what's best, but the second law of nature will contradict the first, that you will do by all means we can do to defend ourselves. You might want peace, but because your neighbor might not want peace, because peace for them is war to you, everyone will necessarily do. Everything will devolve, will descend into this state of war. Okay, we're almost done here. From this fundamental law of nature, now let's read together. This is going to be a little tedious, but so this is what he says. You are a threat to, that's a good idea, Zara. So bad is when you are a threat to others because you are protecting yourself. That is what the case is, though. I'm going to go take your masks. I'm doing it to protect myself, but I'm doing it to protect myself. My protection of myself endangers you. I have to go out to the makola, to the super, and get all the food. When I go out, I have a cold right now. I might be endangering you. Everyone who's in that store. He's not talking about extreme situations. He thinks that humanity exists in extreme situation. He's not talking about a plague. In fact, he wrote this before the plague of London. But this is just, he thinks that this is the state of humans, that society on its own is horrible. We say, why are we could stop here because I think Tila, Zara, Zavi, all these points are well taken. And I'm going to get to Mayan's idea. He's going to talk about the animal kingdom in a minute. But just very, very briefly, to answer some of these points, to address them, not answer, to address them. Everyone acts selfishly because there's total anarchy. He's talking about a state of no government. The natural state of affairs is everyone does what they think is right. And whether it's good, motivated for good reason, whether it's motivated for bad reasons, glory, self-preservation, trying to help your family, it's going to create this state of violence, competition, anarchy, war. And even self-love doesn't mean, right? Self-love, seeking peace for myself, doesn't ensure anything. The best motivations, this is one of his insights. Even the best motivations, and I love Brian's idea here, very, very lovely idea, but your colleagues are right to interrogate it. Even the best motivations will not produce a good state of affairs. That's what he says. Even if I'm trying just to take care of this child here and myself, and I just want peace, I have to be armed to the teeth, because unless everyone assumes that, and that's no way that will never happen. There is, as he said, there's variability. Some people are mean, some people are cruel, some people are nice, some people are strong, some people are weak. No one will ever be the same. That is simply not the state of affairs. We are not clones, because not everyone will agree with your lofty altruism. I have to maintain this state of vigilant security. Society is the problem for him. Not people in their own right. Some people are good, some people are bad. Not nature. It's society. Specifically, anarchical society. The quarantine that a lot of us miss Zara's point. Good, we're going to talk about that exactly. What power does the government have? That's what we need to finish it, right? I didn't decide on this quarantine. The state of affairs that Thomas Hobbes talks about is like we should all be in quarantine all the time. I should always have the tree seen down. I should have the alarm on. I should always have the doors locked. The government is the government is what told me. The government is what told me to stop going out. Excuse me, I didn't mean to click on that. And does the government have that right to basically shut down society? I'm not going to get totally into that idea, but what rights does a government have? What is a government, and what rights does it have? I'm going late. I got to move a little faster. Last thing I want to say about this, though, it's not people in their own right. It's people getting together create this necessarily horrible situation. The interaction between people in a disorganized, anarchical, ungoverned state is one of constant war. Second, to relate it to our situation, the quarantine. A lot of us, not necessarily me, but a lot of us are complaining like, I can't go out. I can't see my friends. A lot of you wrote on your posts, I love going out. I love my wife, can relate to this. I love seeing my friends. I love being in society. Difficult thing is simply the breakdown of that interaction, the dearth or deprivation, being deprived of that interaction. I understand that a lot of you, especially live in traditional societies where there's a lot of significance on that constant interaction, family, extended family, and without that, that's very difficult. That is not something to be taken lightly. To Hobbes, that is the threat. People are fine in their own right. He's happy, he's saying like this is the natural state of affairs is what we are doing. To us, it's very unnatural to all be kept in our homes. Hobbes says like this is the logical consequence of a disorganized, anarchical state. Survival, yeah. In order to survive, everyone will have to stay home. Everyone has to be just completely for themselves. Let's go back here. So the screen should have opened up. Let's now look at the solution as he advises it. And I hope this is interesting. I want to finish it. I see it's not going to finish exactly at 11. I hope I'll stay very close to it. From this fundamental law of nature, by which men are commanded to endeavor peace, is derived a second law that man be willing when others are so too, as far forth as for peace and defense for himself, to lay down this right to all things. If you really like peace, if you're like Reem, if you have a nice, beautiful, if you have a beautiful soul, we are in part 21. Thank you, Reem, for asking, and thank you, Ilana, for answering. That what should you do? What's the right thing to do? You can't hope that everyone's going to desire peace. You can't hope that everyone is going to be a nice person. What did Tila say that was so nice? We protect ourselves actively, protect others passively by following the rules. Yeah, we're gonna get to. We're still in a state. So how do we get to rules? This is what he says. You lay down this right to all things. You have a natural right to defend yourself. You have a natural right to do whatever you think is appropriate in order to defend yourself. But it creates this constant state of war, quarrel, this horrible, brutish state of affairs that we described Monday and reviewed again today. What should you do? Surrender your rights. Not act on them. This is Hobbes' basic thesis. You lay down your rights. Yeah, I agree with you. So a lot of you agree. You be content. You lay down your rights. You surrender or relinquish your natural right for radical individuality and maximal protection of yourself in order to be content with, be satisfied with just as much liberty. And we said natural liberty is doing whatever you think it, whatever in the world, whatever the heck you think is you need to do. That's real liberty, true libertarianism. We can't have that because it creates this horrible state of affairs. And so be happy, content yourself with just so much liberty against other men as he would allow other men against himself. Use that, do not do the golden rule. Do not do unto others what you would not do to yourself at the end of this paragraph, a few lines later. If you think no one else should be allowed to come into your house, then I can't go into your house. If you don't think it's right for me to hoard all the food, then I can't let you, or if you don't think that's right for you, I don't think it's right for you to hoard all the food, then I can't allow it for myself. We give up a share of our natural rights. We relinquish it. We lay down our rights to be sovereign in our own domain. And we divest ourselves of this. And what do? Here's his solution, chapter 17. The solution is obvious because we've been living with this for 350 years. Since about 1650, that 300 years or that 400 years? Yes, that's 400. Coming up, excuse me. I'm not going anywhere. Nearly 400 years, 370 years. States, this is the foundation of the Western state. This is not the only one. We'll read a few of them. And so what do? Anybody who naturally loves liberty, anybody who's got that altruism, who wants goodwill, wants everyone to live in a state of harmony, we should live in commonwealths, states, countries. We should create governments, he says in chapter 17. Not because I necessarily want what's so good for you, or because I think it's great we can all live in a kumbaya world, but because it's the right thing for our own preservation, for myself, in order not to always have to be using so many resources simply to guard myself and to guard my own possessions and my own family. I could come to an agreement with you in which we all say, okay, we'll lay down our guard, we will give up some of our rights, and collectively give up our radical maximalist liberty in order to collectively, I and you create a government. We create a commonwealth. We get out of that, is to say, we get out of that miserable condition of war, which is natural if we are all anarchical to ourselves. If there's no other power, right? If everyone is judge and jury and army for themselves, she can come in or he can come. Anyone's welcome to come in. We're almost at the end. Only a few minutes, and we give it up for the law of. We give it up to a commonwealth. Come here. This is our other. Close the door. Okay, look at it. Wait, where's it go? We're gonna take a. This is. I know. We're at the end here. Everyone wants to see. You want to see everyone? Here, we're gonna wave to you. You wave to everyone. Hello. See, everyone's waving to you. Don't you feel better now?
Hello.
She's a little confused. This was a natural state. Sisters. You know what? This is actually a good example. Siblings exist in Hobbes's world of natural anarchy towards one another, right? If they can get away with it, they will do horrible things to one another. There are limited resources, parental attention, snacks in the kitchen, candy, screen time, whatever it is. There is beds, right? There are naturally limited resources, and they will do everything they have. Like they may want their siblings to get candy, but only after they've had all the Mishlach Manot, right? First, I'll eat all the candy, and then if there's left over, I'll give you some candy. I'll watch all the movies I want. If there's anything else, let me put on this really cool video for you. Parental attention, right? It's great if my sister gets some parental attention, but only after I've had hours and hours alone with mommy. Except that who's the government? The parents. Now, they never got a say in whether to create a government. You and I never got a say whether to create a government. Hobbes is coming up with this idea like it's this myth that every time there's a government, we are always choosing it. But he's saying that before there's a government, this kind of myth, this is like an origin myth of how governments get created. in his time, there was already a government. He's not coming into a state of affairs when there was no government. He grew up under a monarchy. He's now coming up with an origin myth that justifies a monarchy. And so back to screen sharing. You feel better now? You feel better? Yeah? Let's look at this book. Let me just give you a book while we finish up here. Here's a book, and you can look at this book. Okay. Finish up. We got to move on. We're almost done. All right. We're in chapter 17. You can see from the screen that we're almost at the bottom. There's not much more to scroll down to. The laws of nature, equity, and some you would have everyone do with unto others as you would have them do unto you, without the terror of some power to cause them to be observed. And so we create a covenant. We create a kind of agreement in which we give up some of our natural power. We come into agreement that we create what did I find? I should have listed this before. We create an agreement that is not natural. This is what he says here. Remember at the beginning he said that government is not natural. Rulers, kings are not God-given. They're created by the consent, by the agreement of the ruled. That's why there's that in that picture, all those little subjects that make up the sovereign. Then this covenant is artificial, as he's showing in this little section that I'm highlighting. It is no wonder that in order to make a government lasting, we have to realize that it's for our benefit. And the only way to create such a common power that will avoid these injuries, that will allow us to enjoy your own possessions. You don't have to worry about other people stealing your profits. And we said before, like, why would anybody innovate? Why would anybody plant? Why would anybody write anything? Why would anybody do anything if it's all going to be plundered? A fancy way of saying it's expropriated for you. In order to have people enjoy the fruits of the earth, in order for me to enjoy my house and not have to stay, for me to enjoy the natural world and not stay at home all the time, we have to confer. Here it is. This is the origin myth. He's creating a backstory. He's obviously a royalist. This is from that period of the Civil War where they were royalists and Republicans, whatever. And he says, we confer all power and strength upon one man. His version of government is a monarchy, royalty. You give all power to one person, the king. The king is not God-given. The king is created by consent, by agreement of the ruled, upon one man, or upon one assembly. It can be democratic, it can be a parliament, that they may reduce all their wills, the plurality of voices, unto one will. We can't all decide in this class what quarantine. We can't all decide in our communities. What should the rules be about quarantine and staying in our house? I decide I want to do this. You want to do this. You want to go on for hikes. I want to take my kids to the park. We can't decide that. In order to preserve order, in order for us not to devolve into fighting, you can't have the Haredim decide to do this, and the Muslim community decide to do that, and the Chilim to do this, and the beachgoers and hippies to do another thing, the hipsters do another thing. We have to decide. It is all given to one power. They will make all the decisions. We appoint one man, or one assemblyman, a Knesset, a parliament, and they represent the will and the power of everyone. They choose what the rules will be. Their judgments are final. This is more than consent. This is more than consent. It is a real unity of them all. The government is the unity of all of us. It's a social contract. We agree, because it's bad for me and it's bad for you to live in a state of total liberty, which is a state of total anarchy. We make a covenant of each citizen with one another, every person with one another. He says every man, as if every man should say that I authorize and give up my right to rule myself in order to create this other assembly. Only if you also give up your right. I give up my right. We mutually de-escalate. We mutually disarm. Disarmament agreements work the same way. And we give it all right in order to create this one power that we're going to call a commonwealth. In Latin, a civitas, He calls it the Great Leviathan, this great power that's bigger than the rest of us. We would call it the government. We would call it a state. It's not separate from you. It's something that we agree to do together. All right? That's his idea. And that's how we got into a state. Yeah, this is a good question. That's a good question. Would you make the sacrifice? But if you can make the agreement before you go into that room, Zara, would you do it? We're going to go to this room. Each of us has a dagger. We're going to go in blindfolded. Let's make the agreement now, before we go in. Let's come to a kind of agreement. That person is called a sovereign. That's what the government is. It is final. And here's what the sovereign can do. I'm already 8 minutes after it, so let me finish. Let me show you the powers of the sovereign. Right now, our sovereign, our government, our leaders, our leader, are making all kinds of emergent declarations, and this is happening elsewhere around the world. You know, the leaders are, and there's a lot of distrust in leaders, so it's very difficult to do this. What can the Commonwealth do? He's not talking about an emergency, but this is what the Commonwealth can then do. Commonwealth can say what the rules are. Everyone, once you go into it, these are the powers that you then confer on the Commonwealth. All the rights and faculties of the sovereign are given by consent to the people. First of all, that's pretty radical. So you have to realize, coming out of the Renaissance and before the Middle Ages, he's saying that the power of the sovereign comes from the people. So just recognize in the history of ideas, that's pretty important. As for us in our time, what can they do? You have to do everything. It also cancels all former covenants. It's a covenant, it's a brit. Yeah, this is also why Jewish or religious philosophers love Hobbes. Like in the Chilean sense, they love Hobbes because it's all about a brit. It's all about this idea of a covenant, an agreement, and it cancels former ones. It cancels former covenants. That was 32. Excuse me. The part of the sovereign cannot breach the agreements. We're going to get to ideas of revolution. How do you then replace it if you think the sovereign is not doing a good job? That's the American Revolution. That's John Locke for our work next week. But the sovereign has to. There was no such breach. There is in this case no judge to decide the controversy. Like if you have a disagreement with the sovereign, what do you do? That's a major question. But we'll get to that next week in Locke, because Locke has more sophisticated ideas about it. If you disagree, the sovereign can tell you you have to do what everyone else do. It is majority rule. Because, I'm just looking for where he says majority, but he says, even if you disagree with it, even if you personally want to opt out, because the majority of your country has agreed, you then have to abide by the rules. The judgment will create the laws, the actions and judgments. They are the sole judge. They are the sole sword, they have a monopoly, what's called a monopoly on violence. So they are the sole source of justice. They also have a monopoly on violence, meaning they're allowed to, the state can decide to kill someone, and it's called an execution. You decide to kill someone, it's called murder. You can put someone in your house, it's called kidnapping. The state can do it, it's called prison. Finally, any disturbances, emergencies, crimes are suppressed only by the sovereign, and the sovereign can also decide books, ideas. This is pretty radical at the end, but this is censorship in part 38. So to the sovereign, once we make this agreement with one another, I'm going to close this now, and I'm going to conclude our day. In the sovereign is invested sole power of violence, legislation, judgment, and within judgment, according to Hobbes at least, are ideas. They can decide what's publishable and what's not, perhaps even what can be believed. Can they decide we can't go out? Now, we've talked today about how the danger to one another, the relationship, the interaction, how society can be both, we usually think of it as a boon. This is a dark idea, a dark vision in which society itself is the problem. And to solve that problem, Hobbes recommends government. In our emergency, it's the government that's saying, everyone has to abide by these same rules. And of course, it's all about maintaining the protection of us as individuals. They want the people to survive, but it's also with a view to the collective. The reason we're doing this is to not overload the health system, which provides for everyone. And we live in a society, there's only one major society in the world that doesn't have a collective health system. These powers, once we grant them to the sovereign, to the state, to the Commonwealth, are absolute. There's no real backing out of it, except for if the sovereign breaches the covenant. But we have to listen to what they say. This is not necessarily democracy. It doesn't say that you get to keep voting on it. We do have that idea that will come out of John Locke and elsewhere. And it's not necessarily altruistic. It is, however, selfish. The Thomas Hobbes idea is that we do all this for self-preservation. And we're doing what we're doing at this moment, staying at home, retreating away from society for a kind of self-preservation also. Self-preservation that also has this important collective role. I'm going to finish here for today. I just want to, sorry I went longer. I'm going to try to keep it for an hour. An hour 15 is not, hope it's not totally terrible. I think the recording was less time than that. These ideas and their relevance, their applicability for us right now, how history and how people have thought about this is, this is, to use a word that this era, that Hobbes was one of the first to introduce, kind of an enlightenment. It's enlightening. It can be scary. These ideas can be very scary. They are certainly controversial. I'm glad that a lot of you have debated them here in the chat, and I encourage, as the semester goes along, more people to do so. Maybe there's a way to talk about them in person. I know that the Zoom allows for breakout rooms. I'm going to end class now. I'm going to end the recording. I'm going to let people stick around. I'm going to stick around. I'm going to bring my other kids in here because I hear they're still crying in the room. And I will post this for everyone else. We're just trying to educate ourselves. I'm not worried about assessment now. I'm very grateful for the posting that went online, and I'm grateful to have this time with you to talk about it and think about how these fundamental ideas not just create the world that we live in, but how they speak to us right now in this urgent, this crucial, this terrifying moment is important. Homework, keep reading. Next week, we're dealing all with John Locke. You can read all of it. I will, of course, highlight only the sections that we're going to do. I'll probably do the posting again, the online journal. I thought it was successful, but the main work is to read John Locke. I haven't yet finished. I haven't read any of it since 2 days ago. I need to have time at night to do so, and I'll try to identify which sections we're going to deal with. Next week, John Locke, a different idea of what the social contract or what government looks like and what the rights of government are. And we'll have another plague reading that I have to find. See you next week. I'm going to stick around. I'm just stopping the recording now.